And now, it's time for another Dice Tower review with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everybody, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to take a look at a deck building game. In specific, we're going to take a look at Core Worlds by Stronghold Games, which was kindly provided to me for review by the Board Game Exchange, where you can try games before you buy them. Now this game, as I said, is a deck builder in which you're going to be using different types of attack, be it fleet or ground attack, in order to try and take over planets, adding them to your own little area so that you can generate more energy in order to facilitate recruiting more units, in order to facilitate taking over more planets, and the grand goal is to get cards that are worth victory points. So real quick, why don't we take a look at what you get inside the box for Core Worlds and how the game plays, and then we'll come back and I'll give you my final opinions of this game from Stronghold Games. So here you can see the components for Core Worlds set up, and we're just going to look at a two-player game, and we're going to look from the perspective of just one of the players. So you can see our player here has his home world, and this home world will provide them with energy, at the top left here, 3 energy, as well as an ability that allows them to discard cards to get more energy during the energy phase, discarding 2 cards to give them more energy. Energy is a resource you're going to use to play cards and draft cards, and you're going to be using actions in order to expend energy to do various things in the game. The number of actions you get dependent on the turn that it is in the game. Each player will also have a deck of cards, which is their own deck, that they'll be using throughout the game, adding cards to it in order to basically facilitate their mechanism of getting more cards into their tableau to get more victory points, and add cards to the deck to facilitate that. In addition, they're going to have a tableau here that is going to track their actions as well as the energy they produce and use throughout the game. Now, the game takes place over 10 turns. Each turn is going to generate cards from the appropriate deck. There's 2 turns for every deck and 5 decks in the game until the end of the game where you use the last deck. During the game, you're going to start with the draw phase, and each player is going to draw 6 cards from their hand each turn. Now, you'll end up with 6 cards. You may carry a card over from the previous turn, so you may only draw 5, but you'll have 6 cards in your hand at the start of the turn. At this point, you'll move on to the energy phase of each turn. And the energy phase of each turn is when you produce energy, based on the worlds you have in your system. So in this case, I have 3 energy produced by Gamma Prime. That gets me 3 energy, and I have 4 actions which would have been generated at the end of the last turn, based on what turn it is. So I'm going to get 4 actions in turns 1 and 2, and 5 and 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and 6 and 9 and 10. The amount of actions you get in the game goes up as the game goes on. After this, you're going to move on to the Galactic phase. But during the energy phase, there are cards you can play. For example, energy surges here that say you can use this card for 1 energy or 2 energy if somebody else's worlds generated more than you. This is a way to kind of balance the game. When players are generating more energy, you can play these to your discard pile in order to get an extra energy or 2 based on the status of the game. After that, we go to the Galactic phase, and this is when the cards come out into the center of the table that you can get into your deck. And we'd flip cards from the center of this table equal to 2 times the number of players plus 2. In this case, 6 cards in a 2-player game. And you'll see as we flip these out, we have different types of cards. Now, right now we have all worlds, but when we keep flipping, we're going to get some infantry, we may get some starfighters, and we have another world. And the rule here is that you need to flip cards until you have a number of worlds and a number of units equal to the number of players or higher. So in this case, we satisfy that condition. After this point, we move on to what's called the action phase, and this is where players will alternate taking actions in order to get cards or conquer worlds, play cards to their own tableaus in order to conquer those worlds, or do various card actions that are printed on the cards that say, use an action to do this thing. So, we would look at our hand and we'd see, okay, we have several starfighters, we have a tactics card, and we have a hero, which is basically just another type of unit with a good ability. But there are different actions you can use, and we have 4 actions. The first type of action is that we can draft a card from the center area. Now, planets can't be drafted, but we can draft these units, or if there were tactics cards in the center of the table, we could draft those. But in order to draft a card, it's going to cost you energy. The energy cost is printed in this center bar in this little icon right here. You'll see this one is 1, as is the other unit down here. And the units will vary based on what they do. So this starfighter here is going to provide you with fleet attack, which is at the bottom here. You'll see it provides 1 fleet attack. And you can use energy when you have it in play in order to add ground attack to it. So it's a bomber. You can use your energy in order to make it stronger in terms of ground attack, which are things you're going to need in order to conquer planets later and add them to your own systems. The Enviro Trooper here is cheaper based on when your opponents have more worlds than you do. So if your opponents are doing better than you can bring this guy into play cheaper. And he's going to provide ground attack instead of fleet attack. In order to draft these, you would have to spend an action, and you can use the energy you have in order to draft them into your play area. So I could use 1 energy and 1 action in order to draft this starfighter and put it into my discard pile, and it'll come into my deck later as something I can use to put into my own tableau. Then it would pass to my opponent and they could take an action, but it would come back to me, and the next type of action you can take is to deploy units. So we'll see each unit has a cost to play, printed in the upper left-hand corner where the energy number is printed on planets, the energy they provide. And each of my units in my starting deck is going to cost me 1 energy to deploy. These ones, the starfighters, will provide 1 fleet attack, but there are ground troops that would provide 1 ground attack. And then there's my hero that when she comes into play comes with 3 energy on her, which I can use to play infantry units. So like the Enviro Trooper here, I could use energy from her in order to play it into play. But once she's out of energy, she gets discarded. So at this point, when I'm summoning units or bringing units into play, I can do as many as I want in a row. So I don't have to do 1 action, I could do 3. And I could use my remaining 3 actions and my remaining 3 energy to bring 3 units into play. For example, my 3 starfighters. And I would place these into my tableau. And I'd be out of energy, I'd be out of actions, and my opponent would have the opportunity to take other actions until they were out of energy or actions. And since no action can be taken without energy, once you're out of energy, you're essentially done. Now, the other types of things you can do on your turn are invading worlds. In order to invade a world, you'll see that each world has a fleet and a ground strength. So this one has a fleet strength of 2 and a ground strength of 0. But other ones may have a fleet strength of 1 or a ground strength of 1 and a ground strength of 1. Or, for example, this one has a ground strength of 3 and a fleet strength of 0. These are the values you need to match with cards in your play area in order to take those planets over. And so using an action and 1 energy every time you decide to invade a planet, you can go ahead and try and conquer one of them using the cards in your tableau. So let's say our player here had 1 action and 1 energy left. They could spend that energy and that action and use their 3 starfighters here, their 3 snub fighters, in order to conquer a world. For example, they could conquer this one here, whatever the name is, doesn't really matter. It requires 2 fleet strength. So they can take that and place it in their area, and they need to discard 2 fleet strength worth of cards into their discard pile. Now, as a special rule, you can colonize a world with snub fighters or your basic infantry units, placing one of these underneath your world that you're conquering in order to basically remove it from your deck, kind of thinning it out and making things a little bit better. The last thing you can do with your cards is as an action abilities, which are things that are printed on cards that say as an action. Essentially, that card would be played from your hand, or if it's already on the table, use that ability, remove the action, and pay whatever other costs are associated in order to use it. Now, there are cards such as Tactics, like this one, that you can play for their energy costs during combat or during the colonization and infiltration of a planet in order to add bonuses. So this is, for example, that during an invasion, I can add +2 strength if I have at least 2 starfighters participating. So in that previous one, if I had an extra energy left and I needed a little bit more fleet strength, I could have paid the energy to putting this card into play and use it to add +2 fleet strength. But I didn't need it, so I didn't do that. After players have taken all of their actions, you're going to go ahead and you're going to discard the rest of your hand. So you're going to figure out that you're done, you have no more energy or no more actions, you're going to discard the rest of your hand, but you may carry 1 card over from one turn to the next. So maybe I don't want this Tactics card, but I think my hero is going to be useful, I carry it over. In addition, every card that hasn't been drafted or conquered in terms of planets is going to generate an energy token, and these tokens will go on them. They're somewhat timers, but they're also benefits to players who draft them later. If you get these cards, they will come with the energy token and provide you an extra energy for that turn. After that, you're going to go on to the end phase, and you're going to basically get rid of any cards that already had a token on them. So next round, when these already have a token on them, they're going to go ahead and go away. At that point, you will also draw up to your new 6-card hand at the next round. You'll move the counter to the next turn, and you will reseed the board as usual. So you'll generate your energy, you'll get your actions, and then you'll reseed this board up to 6 cards, making sure that you meet the requirements of at least 2 planets and at least 2 other types of cards for drafting. And you'll continue on in this manner, so you'll see again we have 4 actions. As you move on to the further decks, of course, the planets will get harder, but the units will get better, providing better abilities, providing the ability to add extra attack, or to, break the rules of the generic game in several different ways. Some units will even be able to switch between fleet and ground attack based on what you need, or some units will allow you to carry other units over once they're used for an attack to another attack, so you can reuse them instead of discarding them from play every time you make an invasion. The whole point really is to get points, and points are printed on cards at the top right-hand corner. So you'll see that this planet here, although only providing 1 energy when you get it in your area, as opposed to the one that I start with that gives me 3, or the one that I got earlier that was a little bit easier to conquer and provides me with 1, This one takes 3 ground strength to take over, but provides me with a victory point. And as you go on later in the game, you'll find more and more cards that provide you with victory points. So for example, Earth here takes 5 fleet strength and 2 ground strength to take over, but provides you with 3 victory points at the end of the game, and 2 energy every time you generate energy. Or there'll be other cards that are worth negative victory points, but they provide a lot of energy. The last round of the game will see cards come out from this 5th deck, and there are going to be cards in here called Core Worlds that give you bonuses based on specific things in your empire, which includes your deck, your play area, your discard pile, and your hand. Now, on the top of each player's tableau, you can see that there are things that tell them what each of these core worlds do, and you can plan accordingly to try and take over the appropriate core world, each one of them having a different strength. So this one costs 14 fleet to take over, but for each star cruiser and capital ship, which are specific types of ships in these decks that you have, you're going to get 1 bonus victory point in addition to the 6 that it provides. There are also these prestige cards that you can buy, and they get cheaper based on what for every core world you have in your area. So this one's only worth 1 victory point. It costs 6 to draft, but it's 1 less for every core world that you've taken over. Or other ones here cost 6 to draft, another victory point, same thing. But other ones may provide you with either a higher cost and more victory points, but are going to have the same benefit of going cheaper in cost for each core world, which are these final ones that you manage to take over. Dependent on what you've been trying to do with your deck, you're going to try and take over the right core world in order to get you the most bonus points, and at the end of the game you're going to get points for each of the worlds that you've conquered with the victory point values on them, all of the cards in your deck with your victory points, as well as any of these prestige or core world cards that generate bonus points, and whoever has the most points through most effectively using their fleet and ground strength, their energy, and their actions will be the winner. Well, there you have it. That is Core Worlds by Stronghold Games. It's a decent little deck builder. There's really not much more I can give it than that. It's not great. It's not my favorite deck builder. It's not something that I'm going to go out of my way to play, but I don't hate it. I enjoy it enough while I'm playing it, but it's never kind of the thing where I'm like, hey, we should really play Core Worlds. I really need to get that to the table because I enjoy it so much. It doesn't have anything in particular that I find that much more interesting than any other deck builder. Of course, you are using this action mechanism where you have a certain number of actions that allow you to play cards to the table, and you're generating a resource and energy that you can use, but that's really not anything that makes it feel that unique. There are several games that generate actions and allow you a certain amount of time in order to do things, so there's nothing unique there. Of course, the 2 different resources of fleet and ground strength, there's several different games that use different resources in terms of acquiring things, so they're really just currencies you're using in order to buy those planets, and the cards get discarded and come back later, as in any other deck building game. So there's nothing particularly striking or unique about Core Worlds. Is it a decent deck building game? Yes. Would I recommend that people try it? Sure, if you're looking for a good space-themed deck builder, that's fine. But it's not going to take the place of Dominion in my heart in terms of, you know, action generating or engine generating deck building games. There's other deck builders that I'd rather play, and this simply isn't one that I'm going to be keeping in terms of my deck building collection. It's not one that really strikes a chord with me.
To try this game and over 800 others before you buy them, visit BoardGameExchange.com.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.